Hey everyone, and welcome to today's explainer. Listen, if you've ever felt that completely overwhelming, totally relatable urge to turn the act of canceling plans into like an absolute art form, well, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're diving into this really fascinating intersection of psychology and geography. We're going to be looking closely at introversion, social anxiety, and this massive phenomenon that's affecting so many of us right now, the modern city and urban loneliness.
Right off the bat, this brings us to the core tension of our explainer today. You might be sitting there wondering, am I just an introvert or am I actually socially anxious? We really need to figure out if that intense urge you have to sit quietly in a meeting or totally avoid a crowded party is just an innate, healthy personality trait, or if it's actually a fear-based condition that's holding you back from the life you want.
Okay, Section 1, introvert or socially anxious. Let's jump right in and break down the real motivations behind why we choose to be alone.
So, taking a look at this comparison, it really highlights the core difference perfectly. Introversion, that's all about choice and energy recovery. Introverts draw their energy from the inside. They actively choose solitude because, well, that's literally how they recharge their internal battery. Social anxiety, on the other hand, is driven entirely by fear and this intense, overwhelming worry of being judged. Socially anxious folks aren't avoiding interactions to recharge. They're avoiding them specifically because they're terrified of negative evaluation or rejection. Now, here is why this distinction is absolutely crucial. While introversion is just a natural, normal temperament, social anxiety disorder is an officially recognized mental health condition, and it triggers some severe physical and mental distress. We're talking symptoms like blushing, sweating, trembling, your mind just going completely blank, or holding this super rigid posture. And here's the real kicker. This happens even when the person genuinely, desperately wants to participate and connect. Their body is just reacting to a perceived threat. Which, of course, leads us to a pretty fascinating question. Can you be a socially anxious introvert? The short answer? Absolutely yes. Literally anyone can experience social anxiety, introverts included. Needing alone time for self-care is incredibly healthy, for sure. But if you realize you're using solitude solely as a shield, like a self-protection mechanism against the fear of interacting with people, actually, that points to an anxiety disorder, not just a quiet personality.
All right, moving on to Section 2, the science of sociability. Let's shift gears from behaviors and look at the underlying science.
Now, I know this research paper might look like a giant, dense wall of text, but the findings here are wild. It explores the overlapping characteristics between social anxiety and introversion, and it's especially fascinating when looking at neurodivergent populations, like folks with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, because for them, inherent challenges with social communication or reading subtle cues can actively spike their anxiety. It makes social interactions feel incredibly daunting, even for those who naturally lean introverted anyway.
But the biology goes even deeper than that. Get this. Studies show that introversion is actually about 50% heritable. 50%! It's literally biologically linked to how our brains process dopamine, that reward-driven chemical. So, the big takeaway here? Quiet temperaments are biologically hardwired. They're just natural variations in humanity. They are absolutely not character flaws, and they definitely aren't something that needs to be fixed.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit for Section 3, the extrovert ideal. We've looked at the internal science, so now let's talk about the external pressure society puts on us. Enter this concept called the extrovert ideal. Author Susan Cain defines this as the omnipresent, almost suffocating societal belief that the ideal person is gregarious, alpha, and totally comfortable being the center of attention. Because our modern schools and workplaces so heavily favor this loud, collective groupthink, it forces so many introverts to spend their days acting like exhausted pseudo-extroverts just to survive or get a promotion. It is a massive drain on their natural energy.
But you know what? We didn't always live this way. Back in the 19th century, society valued a culture of character, which was all about internal morals and quiet integrity. But then, as we hit early 20th century industrialization, mass urbanization, and the rise of the fast-talking salesman, everything shifted. We suddenly became a culture of personality. Almost overnight, external magnetism, charisma, and how the crowd perceived you became the only things that mattered.
And that shift brings us right to Section 4, the urban loneliness paradox. Let's talk about the geographic reality so many of you are living in right now.
We are drowning in a sea of weak ties. Man, that quote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it?
It perfectly captures the modern city vibe. Cities give us this massive overload of loose acquaintances, casual run-ins at coffee shops, and endless networking events. Yet, despite being physically surrounded by thousands of people, urban life so often lacks those deep, strong ties. You know, the actual, vulnerable friendships that we as humans literally require for emotional support. When you really break down the city experience, it's this crazy double-edged sword. On one side, you have limitless social opportunities and incredibly diverse perspectives. But on the exact opposite side, you're dealing with unaffordable rent, fast-paced burnout, and profound feelings of isolation. Having all that social capital right outside your door becomes deeply isolating when anxiety or just a totally drained social battery stops you from participating. You can literally hear the party happening down the street, but you just can't bring yourself to go.
And that is the ultimate paradox here. You are surrounded by millions of people, yet you can feel entirely invisible. It's that completely absurd reality of paying like $25 for some artisanal cocktail in a packed, noisy room, but feeling way too anxious or emotionally exhausted to even make small talk with the bartender. When you're constantly watching everyone else seemingly conquer these social interactions with ease, it makes a sensitive person feel even more smothered and alone. It's truly a unique kind of pain, being lonely in a crowd.
So what do we do about all this? Let's get into Section 5, Finding Your Restorative Niche. Time for some empowering takeaways.
To actually navigate all this modern noise, you've got to be intentional. First up, honor your temperament. If you're an introvert, allow yourself to recharge on the couch without a single ounce of guilt. Second, if you're dealing with anxiety-driven fears, seek therapy. Social anxiety is highly treatable. You really don't have to just live with that fear. Third, find what psychology calls a restorative niche. Find a quiet park, a cozy library corner, or just your bedroom where you can drop the mask and be you. And lastly, stop worrying about networking with everyone. Just focus your energy on building a few strong ties instead of a million exhausting weak ones.
We've covered a ton of ground in this explainer today, but before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Ask yourself honestly, are you honoring your true temperament? Are you just surviving in an extrovert's world? I really challenge you to reflect on your own boundaries this week. And hey, seek out the right support if fear's the thing holding you back from living your own authentic life. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.